Welcome, Dr. James Beckett, Sports Card Insights, special episode at the SABR Convention, 53rd Annual. There was a committee meeting after the main session dealing with baseball cards. And Jason Schwartz said, why don't you come to the last part of it and you can answer some questions. Kind of an AMA, ask me anything, and was just delightful. The SABR people, just very impressed. They were courteous, they were knowledgeable, and they loved baseball.
I started collecting cards when I was a kid in the 70s. I know this is all about baseball cards, but I was also buying some football cards, hockey, and basketball. I'm wondering your opinion, because maybe those were in its infancy as opposed to baseball cards, whether they might be more valuable, or what you just think about those sports.
The time to get into basketball and football was a long time ago.
Okay.
Because now it's hot. Yeah. So they got no respect when they came out. If you're talking about the 60s, 70s, they were second-class citizens, even though the product on the field wasn't, but they were lesser produced than baseball. They're in worse condition than baseball, and yet some of the vintage football is still not caught up with baseball, because baseball is the main thing. When people talk about collecting sports cards, they still say baseball cards more than sports cards even. But collect what you love. If you love football, in my neighborhood, it was 90+% baseball, and then there was a little bit of football interest in the winter. But there's no wrong stuff. Like I said, I love all cards. Some cards are better than others. And what card is better or worse can change over time. And football has come on strong. Basketball has come on strong. But baseball was always the main thing.
Thank you.
Jim, I see a question from Rich. Should we
I
allow
don't
it?
know.
Should we allow it?
Rich, come on up.
No, I'll ask it from here just like everybody else.
That means it's a tricky question.
It is a tricky question. You mentioned on one of the podcasts we did recently, you were a better 20th century boss than you would have been a 21st century boss. With the growth of artificial intelligence, how do you think you would have used AI in today's world as a CEO?
I'm regarding 20th century as pre-internet. So 21st century is internet. 22nd century could be the next thing, which could be AI taking over the world. So I don't think it's going to take over the world in the 21st century, but it is a tool that is going to be used. I queried ChatGPT, and there's a podcast coming out on this. I queried ChatGPT in a conversational mode about a sports card cruise. Now that could be a SABR cruise. Anything that's a cruise, and I queried back and forth with ChatGPT of what if I did this? And ChatGPT is insidious in that it says, James, that's a wonderful idea. I think you should consider that. And I said, yeah, but I'm trying to figure out how to price it. Then ChatGPT would say, cruises are generally between X dollars and X dollars for how many cabins or room nights that you have. So it's here to stay. The genie's not going to get back in the bottle. And so the 21st century CEO or the 21st century person would do well to not let AI run them, but to see it as a useful tool. AI can be an excuse for shortcutting everything that SABR stands for, of getting a quick answer that is correct but not really. And that's why organizations like SABR need to stay strong and use AI. Rich, I trust you more than I trust AI. If I asked AI a trivia question and I asked Rich, I'm betting on Rich.
I love it. Let's go to Stephen.
Hi, Dr. Beckett. You will not remember me, but we actually traded cards at the annual card show in the Detroit area in the 1970s. I was a teenager and you had a table, and I always appreciated how kind and considerate you were to me, even though I was just a teen.
Yeah, I was probably in my early 20s, Stephen.
I think that's right. And I knew you were working on the first price guide. I think you had an unbound copy that was available. At that time, I remembered there were mint cards, and if it wasn't mint, we called it X-Mint. When your price guide came out, correct me if I've got this wrong, there was a near mint category. And I remember thinking, I've never heard that phrase before. Did Jim Beckett create that category? That's my question for you.
No. The words were out there. The numbers came in when you got the grading companies. But there's been an increasing proliferation and an increased specificity of minute differences in the grades. So near mint was not the problem. It was when near mint dash mint came in. But our attempts were to not have price guides that were based on perfect cards. And so mint is a term of art, but now there's gem mint and there's pristine. So there's even above mint.
I was puzzled also when a card that was absolutely mint right out of the pack wasn't considered mint because it was perhaps significantly off center. I thought, in my mind, wait a minute, it's mint right out of the pack. So
Well,
the terminology puzzled me when it was introduced.
I'm just a person, and some of the people making those kind of decisions, with my friends over at PSA, they address that by calling it a 10 OC. Yes, it's mint in terms of the corners and the edges and the surface, but the centering, it's off-centered. And so it's still a 10 OC. We didn't do it that way. BGS did the subgrades.
So near mint was a phrase that you remember from the 70s before your price guide?
Probably.
Okay.
Probably. It just wasn't a big deal. You weren't asking somebody what the condition was because almost all transactions in the 70s were the opposite of sight unseen. You're looking at the card and you're saying, how much for this card? You weren't saying, do you call this VG? You weren't saying that. You were just saying, how much is it?
Yeah.
Now, if it was mint, it was perfect, they'd probably try to ask a little bit more, but not 10 times more, maybe 10 or 20% more.
Yeah.
So I should have bought up all the nice looking cards. And some people did. There were people that were condition freaks, and they were considered unsporting. That was not fair to go through and pick out all the very best condition cards.
3 years ago, my father passed, and when my brother and I went to clean out the house, we, of course, discovered his card collection and ours. My brother said, you can have the cards. Just gave them to me. What made this real interesting, shortly after, my cousin in Brooklyn called me, and he said, my neighbor found in the attic all these old baseball cards, and we're talking Sam Crawford, Honus Wagner, Lou Gehrig, and he said, I don't want them, but I want to sell them at a fair. You're my cousin. I'm not looking to make a profit. So I called my friend who works at the Players Association. She referred me to Beckett's. He shipped them to Beckett's, and they put like a value, like a number, a grade on them, which I'm sure you know about because it's your company. Now we got to price them. I just heard you telling me the real price is worth like 2 times what dealers tell you. But doesn't Beckett have a standard price like this is what it would be worth, it's a 7, and this is the price?
No, the context. If somebody's got a box of cards, then you can get a price for the box of cards. Not an unopened box, but a box of old cards, a shoebox full of cards. To maximize the value, you generally need to get them graded. And then you can look up each card individually with great specificity. That if it's a grade of a 6 or a 7 or 8, there's lots of places to look up to get a tight range on what that card would sell.
Does Beckett have something like that?
Yes, there's a graded card price guide. Online price guide.
Online?
Yes,
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so that's what we would do. We would go to that
You
online.
can. There's other sources too, but yes. But it starts with grading. If it's a raw card, the range of what it could be, a card could be $10 to $1,000.
See, we have the grade from you guys. We need, if you have any suggestions how to
There's
get a
a
price.
magazine. There's a graded card price guide.
Okay.
Magazine, yeah.
Just go there. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and it lists most cards that you would have there.
I started collecting cards in the 70s, and when card shows became really prevalent in the 80s, I started to take some of my cards and have the players sign the cards more because it gave me more of a personal connection than anything, not for the monetary value, because in that situation, I think a lot of the collectors were saying, or don't have them sign a card, it decreases the value. Now it seems autographed cards are coming out in limited editions. Where do you see this signing of cards evolving to in the future?
You said it's an additional connection point to the player. So that's a positive. But if you take a gem mint card from the 50s and put a scribble on it that was frowned upon, actually now it's coming more in vogue because of the touch point. But generally, back in the early 70s when I was cracking on this stuff, you weren't getting autographs on your very best condition cards. It would be a duplicate. You'd keep your best card, and the duplicate, you'd get it signed. But if you got a duplicate signed and it was Mickey Mantle, that's valuable because the autograph is worth more than the card sometimes. That's ideally what it would be. Get the value of the card and the value of the autograph, you'd think you'd add up those two numbers, but it didn't work that way in the 70s. Didn't work that way in the 80s.
Yeah.
It's starting to work more that way now.
I did a 57 autograph Mantle that I got in person and a 54 Aaron, so it makes me feel good. Thank you.
You should feel good. You can get the autograph graded, and if it's a Sharpie for Ty Cobb, that's a problem. You know? So it needs to be in context. People like cards when the guy was still playing, and they like an autograph that's like an early Mickey Mantle autograph, I think is a premium. His signature evolved over the years, and the autograph authenticators, they know that stuff like the back of their hand.
Dr. Beckett, first of all, I want to thank you. In the 1990s, my father was a columnist for Beckett magazine for 2 years, writing the autographs column, and I was his ghostwriter. So I made a little bit of money off of that, and that foreshadowed a career in writing. Do you have a favorite find from maybe the early part of your baseball card days, whether it be cards, autographs, whatever, where something came to you that you were like completely stunned by that you really treasure?
In December of 1975, I did a buying trip with a buddy, and we went over to this town in Ohio, put ads in the paper, and waited to see who would bring collections and things like that. We got a few collections, but one thing that came in, walked through the door, was an unopened case of 55 Bowman baseball. And the punchline here is that there was some damage because it had some water damage in the corner of the case, that some of those had been infested, let's just say. But there were a number of the boxes that were in really good shape. So I had lots of wrappers, lots of boxes, and lots of great cards. I'm so smart that I threw away the case box. And the case box would have been the rarest thing that I've ever had, I think. But it was just a plain cardboard box. But you could see that it was 55 Bowman, and they were high numbers. Actually, it was a combination of second and third series. That's the one where Mickey Mantle, Hank Aaron, and Willie Mays are in there. So that was one of my best finds ever. And I split it with a buddy, and like I said, we should have kept the box. In fact, my buddy, my business partner for that trip, traded some of those boxes for a 52 top set. 407 cards. He traded to somebody that was a well-known hobby person that exactly knew what he was doing, but he wanted those unopened packs. He felt like that was scarcer than his 52 tops set. Yeah.
I'd take either.
I'd take either.
When you did the Beckett book #1, I was lucky enough to purchase that at the time. As an aside, the little essay you have in there about removing tape from your 1951 Bowman set is fabulous. But it was titled Sport Americana. And as I said, I bought that, but a year or two earlier, I had bought something called a Sport Americana checklist and price guide. And I was wondering if those are related to each other, or was it just a stumble of the name and that's why you got rid of Sport Americana, or is my paperback thing related to my #1 price guide or not?
Going back in the history books, in the mid-70s, Charlie Brooks of the Sport Hobbyist, amazing guy, he started a Sport Americana checklist book. In about 1977 or 78, the rights to the name Sport Americana was acquired by Denny Eckes, who became my business partner in the books originally, but really he was more the publisher. On the other hand, the article that you liked, because he had a chemistry background, that was his article. Denny's, that was not mine. So Denny, very sharp guy, was a fabulous business partner. But then when I moved to Texas, it was more difficult for me to collaborate with Denny. And then I was starting the magazine and things like that. So at some point, Denny and I amicably parted company. He kept the Sport Americana title, and then I just became Beckett Price Guides. So thanks for giving me that good positive memory. Denny was an awesome guy. He just said, I know you can do the prices. Anything else that you don't want to do, I will do. We will make this happen. And he was a man of his word, high integrity guy. Very blessed. Absolutely. In fact, with his Orioles baseball cap, you bet.
I was wondering how grading companies decide what to call a variation and what not to. Like specifically sets like batter ups and 41 Gaudies, where they have different color variations, but none of the grading companies note that on the slab.
It's based on the database.
Okay.
They've got to tie it back to the database, which relates back to the catalog. If it's BGS, it's got to tie back to an entry in that catalog. And where you were saying 41 Gaudies, people didn't really collect them by colors that much. 34 batter ups with the pink and the gray. And actually, I collected by colors, but I think I was the only one, me and John Ramirez. So it's not listed as such. And so there's no way to tie that. So the labels that are created for BGS cards come from the database. Okay. And so there's no variation from that. And the reason for that probably is there was really not a recognition that the pink batter-ups sell for more than the gray ones or the green ones, or that there was any scarcity among the colors.
In 1989, I got my first Beckett Price Guide, and my dad actually bought a box of 89 tops for that because we saw the price of the Greg Jeffries, and we actually pulled 3 of them. But my question actually is, how did you figure out pricing at the beginning? Was it just contacting card shops, card shows?
When I first started, it was more a hobby about things that had already been out and were selling. The magazine is where we were under pressure to come up with prices after something had not been out for very long. And so we had to hit it extremely hard as fast as we could and try to reflect that sometimes the early pricing is not really indicative. So we sometimes would wait, but as much as possible, we wanted to use the empirical data, and it was very tricky. You don't want the situation where the set comes out high, and then the next month there's a bunch of arrows going down. So sometimes we'd wait, but with a product like 89 Tops, there's still, we could fill up this room, floor to ceiling, with 89 Tops. There are at least a billion of those produced, I'm sure. And so there's plenty of them out there. And when 89 Tops hit the streets, it really hit the streets. They came out, and we tracked them as best we could. And Greg Jeffries was the man for a while.
I just got the notice that Dave Parker passed away. And the thought came up in my head, a lot of times when you see an athlete pass away, the market for their cards, autographs, things like that definitely go up, and especially with Parker going into the Hall of Fame this year, I think that's going to be the case. Can you speak to that phenomena about how after an athlete passes, the market fluctuation of their memorabilia?
Let me answer this in 2 ways. Number one, it is a compliment to every baseball player or every athlete, every celebrity, that their autograph, his or her autograph, is esteemed, sought after, and paid highly for. The fact that it goes up after somebody dies, that's very natural. And again, it's a compliment that the increased attention on the Cobra is warranted. He was a great player. I'm glad he's in the Hall of Fame. I'm glad he got in before he passed away. However, what you're talking about is carpetbaggers or people that are tripling the price overnight, and I find that offensive. But it's a free world, and hopefully people will use restraint. Usually after a while it comes back down. But he should be remembered for the feared hitter. I'm a Clemente guy. I was a Pirate fan. So to have Dave Parker, he had a fabulous arm too. Lots of power. His crime is he wasn't Clemente. But he was great.
My question was regarding the magazine itself. My dad and I collected it a lot in the 90s. There were a lot of iconic pictures. Since we're in DFW, I think of Nolan Ryan and the full Rancher regalia from 92 or 93. My question was, what was the thought process into doing the cover, and did you have a dedicated photographer to take the pictures for that?
Actually, early on, we had some designated photographers that were local. But over time, as we got bigger, we had services and relationships with major photographers. But what we did different than a lot of other publications is that we waited to the last minute to choose a cover subject and photo. We did that in order to be timely because the stand walk-up sales for our magazine, they weren't all subscriptions. People would look at it and say, that's interesting, I want to buy it. And that's why in most of the magazines, you will not see a cover story about the cover subject because the editorial package was put together before the cover subject was selected. And they were selected by a combination of our price guide guys, me early on, editorial staff. We certainly got lots of suggestions. We were first name basis with all these card shops, but we wanted timely and timeless, if that's possible. So with Nolan Ryan in that iconic Western posed photo, that's memorable. And hopefully that was cool right then, and it endured over time. If you remembered it, which, thank you for remembering it.